So before we get to a relatively busy night of MLS midweek action, I am quickly going to do a news of the week episode. And the first news I'm going to talk about is actually something that happened last week, and I was actually going to make a specific video talking about this issue, but since I was relatively busy last week, I decided to kind of talk about this week instead of last week. And that I'm pretty sure a lot of people have already heard this incident before, but for those that haven't heard about the specific incident that happened last week, well, in one of the USL Championship game, which was the Phoenix Rising versus San Diego Loyals, right on the stroke of halftime, one of the Rising player, which later we found out was Junior Femming, said a homophobic slur toward Loyals player Collin Martin, and that originally Martin actually got sent off because of that incident, but after some misunderstanding, his red card was being rescinded. Now, at halftime, both Rick Shans and Landon Donovan basically had a heated argument talking about this issue, and Donovan originally told Shans that you got to sub off Femming heading into the second half because this is just absolutely inexcusable of what he of course did in that instant, and that basically Shans said that no, we're not going to substitute Femming because of that instant, and he even downplayed that instant by saying it's just really no big deal and that we should just kind of move on into it and continue into the second half. Now, obviously, Donovan didn't take that very lightly, and that he basically said that, you know what, we're just going to forfeit this game because there's just no point of continuing to play this game if we just make it seem like this is just kind of no big deal whatsoever. And Donovan was right about the situation because this was a very serious kind of matter, and that, you know, after the game he even talked about this incident and had kind of an inspirational message that he of course talked about, which I really recommend for you guys to watch this. But at the same time, you know, the Phoenix Rising, they continue to kind of back their head coach, and, you know, even Junior Femming, who was the culprit in terms of making that homophobic slur, he continued to deny the fact that he of course actually said the same thing. And although we still don't know exactly if that is completely true because it's still an alleged kind of homophobic slur that they're investigating, I have a feeling most likely he of course did say that, and that, you know, right now the only thing we have seen is that both Rick Shans and Junior Femming have been taking an administrative leave, and Femming's just yesterday they was suspended 6 games from the USL. But I feel like there clearly should have been more that has been doing in this issue, because last week we actually had an instance similar to this where one of the LA Galaxy defender made a racial slur toward their opponent, and the Galaxy saw that happen and they immediately terminate that player's contract, in addition to the USL giving that player a 6-game suspension like that. So why isn't the Phoenix Rising doing the same thing? Because I think that incident that happened last week is kind of similar to what happened in terms of this incident that happened, well, just 2 weeks ago, in terms of what happened in that incident was kind of similar to the incident we had last week, and that it just feels like the Rising are clearly trying to downplay this, and that it's kind of disgusting the fact that they're trying to downplay this, because we know that using racial slur and homophobic slur of any kind during the game, or even during a game of any sports, is just absolutely inexcusable. And that, you know, the USL, you know, I know they have already suspended Flemings for 6 games, but they also need to do better in terms of that incident too, and that 3-0 win that the Risings got because the Loyals forfeit that game, that shouldn't have counted to their record. And if anything, they should have had deducted points because of this ugly kind of incident. And that, yeah, I'm kind of really disappointed of how the USL handled this alongside with the Phoenix Rising. But again, we'll see later on if there's kind of more news that is leading into this incident, because again, they're still under investigation in terms of what actually happened during that incident, and whether if there's going to be further punishment that is going to be handed out during this incident. Now, moving on, in terms of the next news, is that Gerhard Stewbert has officially named the head coach of the New York Red Bulls. And yesterday, I was thinking about making a video about this, but I decided not to do it because 2 weeks ago, I kind of talked a lot about Gerhard Stewbert and who exactly he is and whether or not, if he, of course, could do well with the Red Bulls. Well, the only thing I will kind of mention is that I have now kind of found out that Gerhard Stewbert is kind of a head coach that like to press and also like to put a lot of youngsters in his team, which that perfectly fits the system of the Red Bulls. I mean, the Red Bulls are always a team that love to press and always love to try to give their kids and the players from their academy a chance to shine with the main team, and that with him being in the head coach, it feels like this just looks like a perfect fit. Now, that being said, we shall see whether or not if the resort is going to continue. And usually whenever you have a new head coach coming in, the first couple of games could be very interesting in that it could kind of go into two ways. One, it could go very well because a lot of the players are really playing hard to impress their new head coach, or the fact that it can go very badly because the new head coach are trying to implement his philosophy and tactics into the team, and the teams are not quite really adapt in terms of the new tactics and the new way that their head coach want them to play. So we shall see whether or not if the Red Bulls could be successful with Gerhard Stewbert. But moving on, in terms of the next news, well, tonight there was supposed to be 12 games that is going to be happening on this Wednesday action. It's now going to be 11 games because it was announced that the Colorado Rapids and LAFC match has been postponed due to a staff member for the Colorado Rapids that has been tested positive for COVID-19. And that, it's a shame the fact that the Colorado Rapids will once again have to wait another couple of days before they can finally return to action. But if you're LAFC, this is a huge break for this team because coming into this game, I talked about yesterday in the preview how many guys that they're going to be missing in this game due to international duty. Well, now the fact that this game is going to be postponed later, most likely going to be late October, they're going to get those guys that they missed on international duty for this game back in that one, and most likely they might get Carlos Vela back in that game too. So yeah, this is a huge break for LAFC, and that, even though I know during their weekend game they're going to once again have a situation where they're going to be really shorthanded and miss those guys during who are on international break, but at least they don't have to worry about that a lot, and that they have one less game to worry about that, and one less game to worry about that, and one game where you can have your best squad back compared to a game where you don't have your best squad playing against your opposition is a huge difference, especially in this shortened season. So yeah, LAFC, they really caught a big break out of this one, but for the Rapids, they'll be disappointed the fact that they aren't clear to ready to play. Although the very next news I'm going to talk about is something that I kind of had a little bit issue in terms of this, or actually I kind of had some issue in terms of this next news. So one of the DC United player today was announced that he was tested positive and that he did not travel with the team in New York. But yet the league basically decided not to postpone the DC United versus NYCFC game. And what I find that kind of an issue is because there's just doesn't seem like any consistency with the league of when exactly they should postpone game because of players or staff member tested positive and when they shouldn't do. Because in this instance, if there is a staff member with an MLS team that got tested positive and you postpone their game, wouldn't you do the same thing in this one too, where one of the DC players actually got tested positive? I mean, it just that I understand that the league are trying not to postpone games, and they know that postponing game is going to be a headache for them because they're going to have to reschedule it to a new day, which is actually harder than what people think it is. But still, I just feel like there should be some consistency in terms of this, and dealing with this whole positive COVID-19 test. Inconsistent is basically the same thing of saying it's incompetent. And the last thing we need in terms of dealing with this whole pandemic during the regular season is that there's going to be some incompetent ways of the way that we are dealing with this issue. Now, moving on in terms of the next news. Now, yesterday in the preview, I basically talked about how Matrita was surprisingly rumored to be leaving NYCFC and going to be joining a team in Saudi Arabia. Well, that is kind of partially true, but one person in the comment section actually said that he is actually not going to be leaving NYCFC permanently and actually just going to be going on loan to one of the Saudi Arabia club, which I later checked to see if that is correct, and indeed, that is correct. So, yeah, my mistake in terms of talk about Matrita is actually leaving NYCFC and permanently going to Saudi Arabia. But even then, I'm kind of surprised the fact that NYCFC is even thinking about that, especially with the way that Matrita has been just such an important player for them in the last couple of weeks and have really been kind of the replacement that they were really hoping what Maxi Morales can be with this NYCFC team. Now, Charlotte FC have signed an attacking midfielder by the name of Riley McGree from LA United, and that he actually is not going to be joining Charlotte FC until their inaugural season in 2022, and that he's actually going to be going to Birmingham City in the English Championship to just kind of get some game time, and that I think that's kind of good, the fact that he's going to get some game time there, because at first when I heard the fact that he's coming from the A-League, I'm kind of surprised the fact that Charlotte FC decided to sign a player from the A-League, because I don't recall any MLS player or any MLS team have decided to go into the Australian Soccer League to look to see if they can recruit some players. But knowing the fact that he's going to get some game time in the championship, I think this could turn out to be a very decent signing, and that, I know Charlotte is still about a year or two from their inaugural season because of the fact that they decided to delay 1 year because of this whole pandemic situation. But it's very interesting. It's great to see that they are already showing that ambition of trying to build a squad, even though they're still 2 years away from playing their first ever season in MLS. Now, LAFC have signed Ghanaian Youth International, and apologies if I mispronounce this name. I believe it's Kawadu Opoko. That's how you pronounce his name. But yeah, they of course decided to sign this guy, and I feel like this is pretty much a desperation move for LAFC, especially with the way that they are so depleted on the attacking end. They need to have some reinforcement, and hopefully by signing him, they could think that he could be just a temporary replacement in terms of some of the guys that they are going to be missing on international duty on the attacking end. So yeah, we shall see how he is going to do. I haven't really heard a lot about this guy, but I'm assuming he's going to be playing with this team because, again, LAFC is very short-handed right now on the attacking end, and this just feels like it's a desperation move to try to replace some of the depth that they have lost on the attacking end because of the international break. Now, the Quakes, of course, have signed Jackson Yu to a multi-year contract, which this is not a big surprise because Jackson Yu is one of the more important players on this team. And it's a shame that, I know this year he hasn't been playing as well it is, but I'm not going to completely blame that totally on him because, he's been playing with players on that team that is just clearly should not be a regular starters in MLS. And that hopefully once the Quakes does have a better supporting cast around him, this will turn out to be a decent. He could be just as decent as what we saw last year. And that I think maybe in a year or two at a time, if he can, of course, once again show that potential that he has, there could be a situation where he could be going to Europe and making that jump. And that hopefully when he does make that jump, the Quakes would get a large sum of money in terms of that, because I really want to see the Quakes for once start to follow the trend of what many MLS team is doing, which is develop some of their young players and eventually decide to sell them off to Europe to make a bit of a profit out of that. Alan Polito, of course, is named Player of the Week, which congratulations to him, and well he deserved the fact that he of course scored those 2 goals to of course able to get the big win for SKC on the road against Houston. But as I said yesterday in the preview, the bad news for SKC fans is that they're not going to have Alan Polito, at least for the next couple of games again, because he's on international break. And that has to be rough if you're an SKC fan, knowing the fact that he just got back from injury and now he's not going to be available again because, well, there's something called the international break happen, and it's just kind of just bad timing, the fact that he just came back right on the stroke when it was pretty clear the Mexican national team was thinking about calling him back into their international roster. Now, finally, the last news I'm going to talk about is that Disco have decided to fine Michael from failure to leave the pitch. But one thing that I want to specifically talk about is that they actually decided to warn the Galaxy and the Quakes for mass confrontation after that incident that happened in the Cali Clasico, where, for whatever reason, Joe Corona did not get sent off because he put a hands to the face, or in that instance slapped the back of the head of Lima. And the fact that Disco decided not to do anything about that incident, and even, like, I don't know if Disco realized the Cali Clasico is actually a rivalry. And when you have a rivalry like that, things like that is going to happen. And I understand that, yes, there is a league policy where you don't want teams to have, like, a mass confrontation, but come on, it's a rivalry game. What did you expect is going to happen? Do you expect both of those teams were just going to be nice to each other and just kind of pass the ball around like it's a U8 kind of matchup? That kind of stuff, of course, is going to happen. But because of the fact that the disciplinary committee does nothing about the incident besides just kind of warning both teams, just to shows you how Disco, alongside with VAR, is not only being inconsistent in this league, but also being very incompetent with the way that how in the world did they not even think about fighting Joe Corona, where he clearly gone against the league rule, where you're not allowed to put your hands in an opponent's face, let alone slap somebody in the back of the head, and just completely got scotch-free in terms of that. I mean, the only thing I can maybe see why that is not happening is the fact that it's the Galaxy. I mean, the Galaxy are always going to get the benefit of the doubt, isn't it? With some of the dirty act that they, of course, do. But yeah, it's just frustrating to see that incident there was no further punishment during that incident besides Disco decided to forget that the Cali Clasico is actually a rivalry, and that a rivalry is going to have like a mass confrontation like that. But anyway, I guess I'll just move on in terms of talking about that, because it's kind of started to get into my head of how frustrated that incident that I saw last week was just turns out to be just largely ignored, and the league are not even going to do anything about that. But either way, there you have it. That is pretty much it for the News of the Week episode. Let me know in the comments below what do you think of these news, and as always, let me know in the comments below if there's any news that I didn't mention on the board and that you want me to kind of talk about. Let me know in the comments below. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.